Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Show. Little Thursday night football action as we've got the Giants taking on the Cowboys at MetLife Stadium. Coming off a really nice 2.5 unit up night there on Monday Night Football, so we will keep it rolling in the NFL. Going to be running a little giveaway in the comments, so make sure you jump in there, like the video, throw a comment in there with the first TD score for both squads. So I want to know who's going to score first for the Giants, who's going to score first for the Cowboys. If you think one team's not going to score a touchdown, write nobody for one of those teams. But let me know who you think it's going to be for each squad. And if anybody gets that right, I will throw them that $50, even if it's more than one person. So go ahead and get that in and we'll see what it do. For now, let's jump right into the Giants and the Cowboys on Thursday night. Cowboys have won 13 of the last 14 games versus their in-division rival, coming in as -5.5 road favorites here. You can get them at -4.5, so make sure you shop that line, but the total is looking at about 45.5 between these two. Both teams 1-2 coming into this one, both straight up and against the spread. Neither has won at home or covered at home, but both of them have their solo wins on the road. Cowboys beating the Browns, so did the Giants. For the Cowboys on the offensive side of the ball, number 1 in passing yards, number 21 in dropback EPA. So their expected points added on each play that they pass, not that good, bottom half of the league, but they do have the most passing yards because they've been losing for the majority of this season, especially when they're playing anybody not named the Browns, right? They just got blown up by both the Saints and the Ravens, got a lot of passing yards at the end of that Ravens game to also put them ahead in the lead here, but the yards are not nearly as important as the EPA, where they're actually a better run team with the underlying metrics rather than a passing team. The Giants don't do anything exceptionally well on defense except for rush the passer. So they have given up the 13th fewest passing yards in the season. The run is going to continue to be an issue for them. Really, in the linebacking core, especially, not the strength of this defense at all. The defensive secondary, definitely worse. It's really just the defensive line that needs to get pressure and contain. Problem is, Dexter Lawrence is questionable to play. They're incredibly talented interior linemen. If he's not in, this Cowboys team could be in for a lot of rushing yards. On the other side of the ball, the Giants offense, nothing really to write home about here. Bottom half of the league in every important metric, whether it's rushing or passing. For the boys, worst rushing defense in the league. That's what needs to be talked about here. Not only are they 32nd in rush yards, they're 32nd in the underlying metrics, including the rush EPA, expected points added, like we talk about. Been better against the pass, but they've also been seeing a lot of run plays because they've been losing so much, as we said, right? Both the Saints and the Ravens chose to run the ball a lot more in the second half with big leads. Their defense against the pass is actually pretty good, but there's nothing to suggest that they're going to have much success against the run unless they sell out to do so on defense. As we kick off these player props, quick reminder to like the video if you would, and jump in those comments. Let me know who's going to score the first touchdown for each team for a shot at $50. Also got everything you need in the description of the video if you want the link to any of the picks that I'm making officially. The VIP Discord link is in there and a bunch of other stuff. So suggest jumping in there. But let's talk about Rico Dowdle. Receiving and rushing both seem viable, because what I really want to talk about here is how he's been slowly taking over as the RB1 on this squad since week 1. And I would even argue that he might have had more touches than Zeke in week 1 if they weren't dominating and Zeke is the lead rusher at the time and Dowdle was still considered more coming out of the backfield. But it did seem like Dowdle was always going to be the lead back at some point this season, and it seems like it's already happening. If you look at the touches and the snap share, it's been all Dowdle in terms of the trend here. So week 1, Zeke goes 51% of the snaps, Dowdle goes 44%. Since then, it's been all Dowdle. And let's keep in mind that there is the fact that Dowdle is the receiving running back, right? And they have been losing and passing a lot more. So it has made sense that he's been out there for more, but the touches themselves are also pretty stark. So in week 2, Dowdle goes up to 42% and Zeke drops to 40%. Since then has been just out-touched and out-snapped by Dowdle the whole time. Week 3 in this past game, Dowdle has 44% of the touches, or excuse me, the snaps. Zeke has 28% of the snaps. As far as the touches go, he's been out touching him since week 2. Would have done so in week 1, but once again, that was a blowout by the Browns. Nothing that I'm really too worried about. I really think that by like next week, even this week, you're just going to see a really stark difference. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, he's got twice as many touches as Zeke does, whether it's pass or rush. So you feel good about that moving in. And this Giants defense is not good at limiting receiving running backs, in part because they get so much pressure. They really sell out to go get the quarterback. And in coverage, like I said, those linebackers ain't it. So I think Dowdle's a real good number here at the rushing yards, or excuse me, the receiving yards. And I would consider the latter play for him here as well. I'm seeing a lot of predictions for CeeDee Lamb to go off against this Giants squad this week. And it's hard to argue with that, except for one potential thing that might help here, which is the Giants play a ton of zone. CeeDee's fine against zone. He's better against man, but he's fine against zone. Thing is he's going to be looked at very consistently here. The Giants are much worse against tight ends this season than they are against wide receivers, and they played Justin Jefferson and Amari Cooper so far. And Cooper had a good game for sure, first good game of the season with the Browns, but at the same time, and Jefferson had a good game as well. Still, they at least limited them and still played them and are still 10th limiting wide receiver yards on the season. CeeDee does have the 10th most yards and the 8th most yak, but he's been playing a lot of man, which allows you to get away from your guy and then have nothing but green in front of you, right? Now he's playing a team that's going to be playing a ton of zone, and that's a big reason why they're actually a little bit worse, actually a lot of bit worse against tight ends rather than wide receivers, as tight ends such as Jake Ferguson, who will be playing in this game for the Cowboys, if they're able to find soft spots in that zone, that's an easy 12 to 15 yards. So we've seen that given up by the Giants a number of times on the season so far, a reason that these numbers say they're a little bit better at defending those wide receivers than they are the tight ends. I'm not suggesting an under for CeeDee. He still has beatable numbers at 79.5. I would just be careful with just going all out on him to have a 2-touchdown day or any kind of bananas numbers like that. So as you can tell, I'm a bit higher on Jake Ferguson here, the tight end for the Cowboys, who, after almost looking like he might not make it back for the rest of the season with a nasty injury in week 1, already came back in week 3, 1 week later after missing week 2. So I do think he's still going to be in line for a big season. In fact, if you can trade for Jake Ferguson in your fantasy leagues right now, this is a wonderful buy low. Even after getting 95 yards last week, the tight end position is very scarce with a ton of injuries. This is a really good pickup if you can get him. But look at those targets. 16 targets in 1.5 games of football since he had to leave that opening week against the Browns. 8 targets in 10 quarters? 16 targets in 10 quarters. I'll take 1.5 targets per quarter in the NFL. He's been an absolute monster, and we've known Dak loves throwing to his tight end since he came into the league. That's been the case with Dalton Schultz was there, and Ferguson took over last year and turned into an absolute monster. Probably a good look for touchdowns again, as he had the most red zone attempts and targets last season among tight ends. He's now gone over this in 7 of 9. And keep in mind, he was a rookie last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me. But either way, this last year was his first year stepping in and being the man for that team. And rookie tight ends aren't supposed to be good. He was very, very good and came on at the second half of the season to go 7 of 9 over in the last 6 of 8, now make it 7 of 9. So things looking really good for him and Dak in the future as well. And like I said, the Giants, 10th in terms of limiting wide receiver yards, 21st in limiting the yards of tight ends. So I do think Jake Ferguson's a bit of a better play with a much lower receiving yard number here than CeeDee Lamb. Looking at the G-men, we've got Daniel Jones, and this is a very simple explanation. Take his rushing, maybe take the passing. The passing's pretty low as well. It's at about 200 yards, and as I've been told multiple times by people much smarter than me, if you are an NFL caliber quarterback, you can throw for over 200 yards against any defense. So I'm still saying he could get those over on the pass yards. I think you're going to see a lot of rushing from this Giants team in general, though. So a little bit shorter routes, a little bit more dink and dunk, and keep the ball in their hands and rush that ball against this awful Cowboys rush defense. You're talking about man defense as well. That's really important here when you're talking about a rushing quarterback. You don't have his guys who are spying the quarterback, because if you're playing zone, you need to have your eyes on the quarterback to know if he's throwing the ball into your area of the field. Plus, obviously, you're responsible for a space, not one person. Dallas has allowed the 4th most rushing yards to QBs, in part because they also have the 4th highest pressure rate on quarterbacks. So they're forcing guys out of the pocket. Granted, let's keep in mind, they've also played Lamar Jackson, so that's always going to make your bloat your stats here when you're talking about defense against rushing quarterbacks. But the pressure rate is a big deal, right? That is something that comes into play and forces guys out of the pocket, like Daniel Jones. The other thing is, because of that pressure rate, you do need to run some stuff that neutralizes the defensive line and the rush in general. So that's things like a halfback draw or quarterback RPOs, right? Where it's now he has the option. Does he want to pass it off or does he want to take it himself? I expect that to lead to at least 7. I think the over on the rushing attempts is also pretty good here because I do think he's going to be rushing about 7 to 10 times in this game, just based on the fact that there will be about 2 to 3 plays called for his number, or at least giving him the option. And then there's going to be a bunch of times, probably 4 to 5, where he's forced out of the pocket with that really good Cowboys D-line. So love the rushing for D Jones in this one. Not as much the passing, but not saying fade the passing either. Devin Singletary now. I like surprise, surprise. I'm taking a running back against the worst rushing defense in the league. I think if you can still get positive money on an anytime touchdown for Devin Singletary, that's a good look. The yards are fine as well. 60.5 rushing yards is a number that he's consistently gone over since last year. Totally different situation when he was on the Texans. Still, it's proved that he's an NFL starting running back. Like he could have been that on the Bills. Once they got James Cook, he was out. Then he goes to the Texans, can't really get any time until Dameon Pierce isn't good anymore. Then he goes in, and what does he do? Helps them get to the playoffs in the second half push. So I think he's going to continue to be a really huge part of this team. His rushing attempts are at 14.5. If he gets 15 rushing attempts, this should be good for the yards. But the fact that he's getting so many looks inside the red zone because he's the only dude eating for the Giants inside the red zone, and really in all parts of the field, he is the workhorse for this squad. I feel pretty good about him getting the 15 touches, 7 inside the red zone in 3 games. If he gets 2 red zone attempts again, really got to like that for Devin Singletary to get into the pay dirt. Now for a Giants wide receiver not named Malik Nabers. And God love you, Malik Nabers. As a Giants fan personally, you're the only thing that gives me any hope that this team has a shot on offense to be good, maybe this year or at least in the years to come. That said, Wan'Dale Robinson. I think this is a really good play with his low numbers. I think he's a good over in this game. He is the 15th most targeted wide receiver in the NFL. Let that sink in, that over 3 games, he has 24 targets, averaging 8 a game. His receiving prop for receptions right now is at 4.5. If you get plus money for that, I still think that's a good look. He's caught 6 balls in 2 of the first 3 games of this season. Might be in line to do it again. The 15 catches that he has for 123 yards doesn't make you feel great about the yards, but it's still an average of an over this number where he's at about 33.5 receiving yards, and he's at over 40 per game. Just didn't have as good of a game against the Washington Commanders. That said, he's running from the slot, where the Commanders are actually better at defending the slot wide receiver than the Cowboys are. That's how bad the Cowboys have been this season in this more short yardage stuff, and their linebackers not good in coverage at all need to sell out. So that's a big part of why the slot does pretty well. Nickel corner as well is going to have his hands full with Wan'Dale, who's going to continue to run routes at about a 90% participation rate. And Dallas and Minnesota, I wanted to bring this up. They play really similarly, both in how they play defense and the coverage. They both run a ton of man, and they both run a lot of too high safeties. As a result, guys like Wan'Dale are able to come into the middle, right in between the linebacker and the safeties there, and find a nice spot to get about a 7-yard, sometimes even as high as 10. Got a very low ADOT for Wan'Dale, but that's okay in this game because of the fact that this team's playing that higher zone, that they want to limit big things, and they're going to be focused on Malik Nabers, who might already be the best receiver in the NFL. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but he's been absolutely insane. So already the best rookie wide receiver numbers through 3 games of anybody in the history of the league. That draws a lot of attention. Wan'Dale should be the beneficiary of it. And that is all the time that I have for you guys in this one. Reminding you about Outlier.bet, one of the best tools that I have out there, and I'm using it every day, talking about the W and the NFL. I'm going to be using it for the NBA as well. If you do want 7 free days to Outlier, go ahead and jump in the link, the description of the video rather. Grab the link to that, get a 7-day free trial. See if it works for you before you go ahead and make the purchase. But I do want to let you know about that, and that there's going to be more NFL videos coming out for this week 4. So make sure that you do subscribe to the page. Appreciate any likes that you could throw my way as well. Either way, we will be back, and until I see you then, happy betting.